Hey everybody, it's your old pal Wood Doofus here. A few weeks ago I made one of these flags for my office, and I subsequently made 3 more of them to think I could probably sell them on Nextdoor or Facebook Marketplace, something like that. So I made 3 more of them and had success selling them just on Nextdoor for $100 a piece. And on top of that, I had a lot more interest after I finished selling those 3 to make more of them. So based on the response that I got, I went ahead and made 10 more of them. Now this was a lot of work. It was probably 15 plus hours of work to make 10 of these. But the wood that I bought for these flags only cost me about $60. So at $100 a flag, I can make about $1,000 out of that $60. Now there is equipment that I have to use. That all costs money, I understand that. But if you have basic tools, you can make these. Most of the flags that I made in this batch are already sold based on some communications that I've had through Nextdoor. So let me walk you through how I did this, and maybe you can do this yourself. So these flags are 24 inches by 13 inches. So I bought 3 2x12s that were 10 feet long, and I started by chopping those 2x12s down into 24-inch lengths. Then I take those 24-inch lengths to the table saw and I start ripping 1-inch strips out of each one of those. Now for 10 flags, that's 130 strips. So we're talking about a lot of cutting. Definitely be careful when you make repeatable cuts like that for a long period of time. It's easy to lose focus, so stay focused and stay safe. After I got all my strips, I batched them into quantities of 13 for 13 stripes, and I numbered the backs of them. I numbered each individual flag number that they will be, and then I numbered each stripe and what color they would be, and that way I could separate them later for staining and put them back together without any problems, and that worked out pretty well. At this point it's time to clamp it up, so I clamped up the strips and prepared them for the grinder. It's important that you don't glue them up yet because you want to be able to stain them as separate strips. I find that way easier than taping and staining later. So the clamps will keep the strips together as you grind them, and you just kind of find your own pattern and try to avoid having flat spots so you can simulate the waviness as you see fit. Everybody does it a little differently. This is the way I did this batch. After the grinding, I went ahead and did the sanding. Now you want to use 60 or 80 grit sandpaper to make sure you can sand the grind marks out of that as much as you can, but some of the grind marks add some character to the flag, so I don't mind them too much. The grinding and sanding process probably took me 20 to 30 minutes per flag, so think about that when you're thinking about how much work goes into this. It's a very grueling process and it's a very messy process. So always factor in where you're going to do it, how you're going to do it, and the time that it takes to do it. Wear all the safety protection that you have, like a mask, ear protection, eye protection. You need all that stuff. After the grinding comes the burning process. I have a propane torch which goes pretty quick. If you have a small plumbing torch, it'll take quite a while, but it's not impossible if you're just making a few of them. I had a little mishap where the hose clamp came off, so once again be safe and make sure you don't explode yourself in the garage. After the burning process, I separate all of the pieces based on the identification marks I put on the back of the slats. I separated them so I could stain them in batches to keep the colors separate so they don't bleed into each other when I'm trying to stain things. To separate the blue and the red, or the blue and the white, I use razor blades and just kind of tap them in with a hammer, and that way you get a crisp line at the end of the day. I spaced out the union space on each strip with one of these acrylic things, which I actually didn't use this because this is a wavy flag. I don't want to use this. I'll show you later what kind of stencil I used. The stains that I used, the red is a stain called Barn Red from Varathane, and the blue is called Worn Navy. That's also Varathane. With the white strips, I just used some white paint that I had sitting around, but I diluted it a little bit with water because I didn't want it to be too thick. I really like the red and the blue colors that I use. It's basically the exclusive colors I use for all the flags that I've done. And I've seen so many other colors that I don't like that I just keep sticking with what works. After the staining comes the glue up. Now I make sure just to put the glue on the bottom edge of each strip. And that helps to minimize the squeeze out that happens on the top of the flag. That can really mess up your product. You can always wipe it down, but you want that to be minimal because that glue just won't be attractive. If you do get some squeeze out, you can wipe it down with water and then dry it afterwards, or you can wait till it gets more tactile after 20 minutes or so and try to peel it off with a scraper of some kind. Either way, you don't want any residues left for the rest of your process. So like I said, I make the star stencils actually with my Cricut machine. Now the Cricut machine costs anywhere from $150 to $200. It's not a big investment and it's very versatile in the kind of work that I do. I've had that machine pay for itself about 20 times over. I designed the star stencil myself, and you can use the Cricut machine with your laptop or your computer or your phone, and you don't even have to have it hooked up really. I use my phone to map out my stencil, and I have to measure the overall width of these stencils. Now at 1 inch a piece, they should be 7 inches, but when I squeeze them all together, they ended up being a little bit less than 7 inches. So the beauty of having the Cricut is you can narrow that dimension and everything falls into place. So I print out 3 at a time on a 24-inch mat, and then I have to pull each star off 1 at a time, which is a long process, but I got pretty efficient at it. So once I have all 10 stencils mapped out, I'm ready to start sticking them on the flag. Now that can be a confusing process when you got the waves in it, but with a little practice you can get the hang of it. I tape off all 4 corners, and then I have a cardboard sheet that protects the rest of the flag, and then I just spray that stencil on with some white spray paint. Now it's important to keep that spray paint can about 10 inches above, pointing straight down to minimize any other overspray and to minimize the leakage. I managed to do all 10 of these star stencils without any major issues. All I had to do was take and scrape some of the edges every once in a while with something sharp just to sharpen up any of the stars that got a little fuzzy with the waves in the wood. Otherwise, it turned out pretty good. After the stars are on and they dry out, it's time for the first coat of polyurethane. I use the fast drying water-based polyurethane, and I use the highest gloss I can find at the store. You can use whatever kind of finish you want, but I like the glossy stuff, and it dries in probably 30 minutes. In between coats, you can use a balled up piece of brown paper to smooth it out, and that keeps it a little bit shinier and a little bit smoother to the touch. After the first coat of polyurethane is when I like to use the grinder on the back, and you only have to use the grinder along the edge of the back, and you just match the contour of the top of it. And you can make it as thick as you want. I go for about 1 inch thick, but if you wanted to make it thinner than that, you can do that too, and it gives a pretty good look when it's hanging on the wall to have that wavy look to it. One of the biggest key factors is having that ripple effect on the back of it as it hangs on the wall. It really adds to the effect, and it really draws people's attention when you're trying to sell them. So after all the backs are grinded up the way you want them, it's time to put the final coat of polyurethane. I put 2 coats on these. You can put 2 or 3. I don't think anything more than 3 is necessary. Once you got the fronts finished with the polyurethane top coat, you can flip them over and add some D-rings. And those D-rings are obviously so somebody can hang them on the wall when you sell them. Now there's a lot of products in here. I will put links to these products in the description, like the D-rings, the Cricut, the stains, all those things like that. So make sure you check out the description for any links to any kind of products that you think you want in doing this project. So that's the whole process. It's a pretty good final product. Like I say, when you make 10 of them, it's a really long process. Making 1 of them might not take so long. It's good to practice before you start batching them out to figure out how you want to do it and the pitfalls that you might run into. I think this is a great product. I think it's worth at least $100. I'm doing pretty well at that price point in my area. So I wish you luck in everything that you're trying to do, and as always, don't be afraid to be a doofus.